Hi there, everybody. It's Marin Base with Grant's Magic U, coming to you live from inside the black box. What's that all about? Well, if you've been following along the emails that I've been sending out to the Grant's Magic U community for the last few weeks, you know that I am really excited about putting together a training for you based on my experience as the Grantmaker program officer, review team coordinator inside the funding process that I manage. I have so much that I want to reveal to you about what goes on inside that black box. When you push the submit button for your proposal disappears. Something happens. You don't really know exactly what it is. Something pops out the other side. So we're going to go inside that black box and show you what that process is really all about. In fact, that's what you see on the board behind me there. That's my planning board laying out the entire 8 checkpoints, as I've come to call them, that your proposal moves through inside the typical Grantmaker's black box. So that is what the full course is going to look like when it's all done. But last week's email promised you that I would take a little bit of time this week and share with you some key information about how do you get feedback from the Grantmaker about your proposal. What did the reviewers see? What did they talk about? What is coming? What is actually going on with your proposal with the reviewers inside the black box, and how can you find out? So I was about to sit down and write this all out in blog and article form, and I realized, no, what I wanted to do instead was just sit down and talk to you just as if we were sitting across the table from each other over a nice cup of coffee and talk you through what I know, and hopefully really help you do two things. Number one, I want to help you understand how reviewers think. And number two, I want you to understand how to get the best possible benefit out of the feedback that you do get. Now, caveat and full disclosure here, I am completely aware that it is not possible to get feedback from every grant maker. Now, if you're, hopefully you are a person who always wants to find out how you did, get some good feedback to help you get a little bit of information about what you might do differently to get a better result the next time around. That's job one, be that person. But I also know that, and I want to share with you that you don't always get feedback that's useful. There are all kinds of reasons why Grantmaker A, Grantmaker B, or Grantmaker XYZ, the review team coordinator, the program officer, whatever the case may be, may not be able to, or be willing to, or want to give you feedback from inside the review process. And as we all know, if we've ever done this before, typically the feedback that we do get tends to be pretty generic and not all that helpful. You know what that sounds like. We had far more proposals submitted than it's possible for us to fund. Unfortunately, yours was one of those we had to decline. All right, so is that useful? Is that not useful? Is there a way of getting better information than that? What can we do to increase the chances that we can get feedback that's actually valuable to us in moving forward? And what do we need to know about making sure that it is valuable? There are several pitfalls along the way, and I want to tell you what not to do. Number one, don't be the person who never asks for feedback. Just because you don't always get it doesn't mean you shouldn't always ask. And when I say always, I mean whether or not you get funded. I will never forget, way early on in my career, I was writing federal grant proposals for a city human services agency, and I was getting pretty successful. I was getting far more awards than were being turned down. And I remember going to my boss and saying, I need you to sign off on the Freedom of Information Act request, that tells you it was a little while ago, to get the review comments back on the proposal that we just got awarded for whatever the program was. And she looked at me. She was so perplexed, and she said, I don't understand. I said, well, what don't you understand? And she said, we got the award. What on earth do you want the comments back from the reviewers? And I was shocked by that. It never dawned on me that you wouldn't want the comments back from the reviewers on a proposal that you actually were successful in getting funded. Don't you want to find out what went right? What did the reviewers see that really worked for them? As well as when you don't, what might have been going on in the review process that could be helpful for you. So number one, don't be the person who doesn't look for feedback. When we don't get feedback or we don't ask for it, here's what happens. And I know we can all recognize ourselves in this. We begin to make up stories. We begin to assume things. We begin to try to figure out what might be going on based on our experience, when in fact there's a whole different set of experiences taking place, excuse me, with the reviewers that we can't see. It's invisible to us. That actually drives the decision-making process. But if we don't know what that process is all about, we're not in on those conversations, and all we know is our proposal went in and it's coming out with a decline attached to it. We can make up all kinds of crazy making stories about what actually happened. So don't make up stories. Ask for feedback. Also, number two, don't be the person who asks this way. Don't do this. This is a big X. Don't do it this way. Don't ask, why didn't you fund our proposal? Now, that's a very brusque way of putting the question, but the underlying question is the same. Even if you soften it up with a little bit more language, it's basically, tell me why we didn't get the grant. What did we do wrong that didn't get us the grant? Why is that the wrong question to ask? Well, it's the wrong question to ask because it demonstrates that we really do not have a clue what the reviewers are going through on their side. Because almost always, it's impossible for them to explain to you all of the conversation, all of the comparisons, all of the back and forthing that went on that resulted in some proposals getting funded and other proposals not. There's one exception to that, and that's the exception of the technical violation. There may be other exceptions on a case-by-case basis, but very broadly speaking, the only exception that I care to make a rule basically is the technical violation. What the heck is a technical violation? Well, there are several levels where any proposal can be knocked out of contention, just like Dancing with the Stars or any of those other competition shows that we watch on TV. I never watch them. I just hear about them after the fact, right? Never watch them. But here's how that goes. You'd be surprised how many proposals get knocked out of contention before they ever go to the review process because A, they're not in on time. Okay, they don't meet the deadline. That's checkpoint number one. That's back there. Checkpoint number two is the technical review. And this is where the proposal is being looked at, not from the content perspective, not from the substantive perspective, not on any of the qualities of the program, but simply counting the pages, double checking that the attachments are all there, checking out the margin sizes, if that was one of the technical criteria that were being used. So if a proposal, not your proposal, because it will never happen, you will always cross your T's and dot your I's and make sure that you make it through the technical review round. That's point number two back there on the board behind me. But if the proposal gets knocked out at that level, it's not that hard to find out. Okay, a very candid reviewer will say, well, frankly, your proposal ran over the stated page limit that we expressly stated in our request for proposals, or frankly, your proposal came in missing a number of the required attachments. All right, but that's not going to happen to you. I'm not talking to you. That's never going to be happening. You're a part of the Grants Magic U community. We know better than that. Beyond that, in the individual review process, though, which is also behind me there over that shoulder, and the group process, when those individual reviews come together, and now we're doing not just looking at each proposal on its own merits, but actually doing a head-to-head, I always start to say head-to-head competition, and that's not at all what I mean. It's not a competition. It's a head-to-head comparison. There, that's what I'm looking for. Head-to-head comparison. Then that's when things become a little more complex. There are lots of things that come into consideration, lots of different elements to the conversation that have less than you might think to do with the merits of any one proposal, less than you might like to think with the number of points that any one proposal had coming into the group review, and a whole lot more to do with how the various aspects of one proposal fit with those of another proposal. And what I call, and the reviewers basically in making their final choices are looking less at the individual best proposals and more at the grouping of proposals that I call, that have what I call the portfolio impact, the collective impact that that funder wants to make with its grant making in this grant making round, given this particular set of proposals. All right? So the best I can do, if you come to me and ask me why weren't we funded, is to say we had more really high quality proposals come in than we were able to fund. There were other proposals that in the end the reviewers decided were a better fit for what we want to be accomplishing collectively with our grant making. And yours, unfortunately, was not one of those that we selected. So that doesn't give you any feedback at all that's going to help you going forward. So we don't want to be the person who asks that question either. We don't want to be the person who asks, why wasn't our proposal funded? Even if we ask it in a very nice way. Here's what we do want to ask, and now we're getting closer to the right way to ask for feedback. It goes more like this. Well, first of all, let me say the right way to ask for feedback, start by asking respectfully and with appreciation. So the funder, the grant maker, the review team coordinator, the review team members put a lot of work into the review process, whether your proposal got funded or not. A lot of work went into that review team process. And I know I really love it. And most of the program officers that I've spoken with say they really love it too when somebody takes the time to express appreciation for that work. So that's a great way to start, with respect and with appreciation. But then the question becomes something like this. We are intending to take this same program out to other grant makers in our community and also to other donors as well. We're 100% committed to getting this program off the ground and underway. We're wondering if there was anything that came up during the review process, if there were any comments that came up from the reviewers, any conversation that happened among the reviewers that you could share with us that would help us strengthen our proposal for another time around. Now listen carefully to what I said there at the end. It would help us strengthen our proposal for another time around. What am I not asking? I'm not asking that would help us have a better chance of getting a grant from you the next time around. Why not? Well, you might think that the information you get from that would be helpful, and I might actually be able to give you some specific information about that. I might say, for instance, well, as it turned out, our review team ended up looking pretty closely at the collaboration plans that each proposal was presenting. Over and above the specific stated priorities, we began to really compare the collaboration plans, and other proposals had a stronger collaboration framework than yours did. If I were to make one suggestion for another funding round, it might be to work on strengthening your collaboration framework. So that's great. That gives you something specific you can work on. But that only makes a difference if, in fact, collaboration is still important in the next go-around for that particular funder. See what I said? I said collaboration arose in the conversation over and above the stated priorities. Next time around, for whatever reason, it might not be collaboration that comes up as one of the distinguishing features of the winning proposals. It might be something entirely different, or there might not even be a collaboration framework at all. And what happens if we're not really careful, this was a very review process specific piece of feedback. It was specific to this group of reviewers. It's what this group of reviewers saw, talked about, what emerged from their conversation specific to this review process, these reviewers, and this particular set of proposals. In another funding round with the same grant maker, the conversation could be very different. The proposals are going to be very different. The review team may be very, very different. So if we make the mistake, and it's a considered mistake, it's something we have to think about, but if we immediately imagine that the way to be more successful next time for this funder is to go create a stronger collaboration framework, we have to be careful to see if that is actually an ongoing priority for them before we go out and start to work on that. Otherwise, and we'll talk more about this in a little bit, we're going to find ourselves chasing a tail, running after the feedback, trying to shape what we're doing to the review that we're getting from a specific process, a specific group of funders, set of eyes looking at a specific set of proposals. The next time, the mix is going to be very, very different. And we just don't want to be running after the reviewer's points that way. All right. So there's a subtlety there. So what do we want to be aiming at? If we're not asking for how can we be more successful in another funding round, and I know for me, in the grant making program that I manage, we have different priorities every single year. We have the broad framework that we're always working inside, but inside that broad framework, we're constantly moving our focus from one issue to another. All right, so that conversation wouldn't even help. Let's move on to what does work. The language that I shared with you a few minutes ago is not specific to this particular funder. You are not asking what could we do to have a better shot at getting a grant from you the next time around. Remember, you're saying we want to take this proposal out to other grant makers and other donors in the community. What came out of the review process by way of the reviewers' comments, discussions, conversations, considerations, and decisions that you could share with us that would help us strengthen our program and our proposal for other audiences? So now you've just opened up a lot of possibility for some really helpful feedback. And if you're speaking to a grant maker representative who's really open to this, you can learn an awful lot. All right, so this is where I would be able to share information that would be, let me think of an example here off the top of my head. Let's see. Well, I had an example a minute ago and it just sort of flew past my head. Well, here's one. Maybe the other one will come back. The review team as a whole thought there was really a solid plan behind what you were proposing. But there were sections of the proposal that were pretty murkily written, if that's a word, where it was a little dense for us, and we had to work pretty hard to figure out what you wanted us to know, and we weren't always sure. We found ourselves second guessing sometimes. Now, if I were to advise you on how to think differently about your proposal next time, you might want to take a closer look at the language that you use and the way you put that language together and see if there's a way that you can make the language more transparent. That would be tremendously helpful feedback, and it's not specific to any one funder. It's not specific to any one grant-making process. It's like, wow, not only this proposal, but let's go back and take a look at all our proposals and see if we can see what we're being pointed to there and make a difference. Another example might be, actually, this comes from my own real life example. I'll share that in just a moment for you as well. Well, one thing that we noticed was, oh, here we go. This is the example that I thought of a moment ago. You're seeing my thought process unwinding as we talk here. One thing we noticed was that over here you had your impact outcomes, and those were very clear. Thank you for that. All the reviewers said that your impact outcome statements were very clear. And over here you have your evaluation and what you're planning on using as your evaluation standards and your evaluation measures. What we noticed was that the two didn't mesh as tightly as we would have liked. There were some outcome areas that didn't seem to connect in rock solid with the evaluation plan, and there were some evaluation plan aspects that it was difficult for us to see where they lined up with the outcomes that you were after. So you might want to go back and take a look at what that looks like in your own proposal. Okay, so you've got language and you've got, sort of a lack of strong connection here. Neither one of those on their own might have been a factor in whether your proposal was funded or not. Say your proposal wasn't funded. And maybe the fact that it wasn't funded had nothing at all to do with either of these two factors, that it was more about duplication of geographic area or duplication of service area, one of those other things that you can only see when you're looking at a head-to-head comparison of proposals, 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 proposals. But what you're getting is feedback that is not part of the competitive conversation, but can actually help you do a better job another time of presenting your program to other prospective funders and donors. So on the one hand, it's specific to the way the proposal itself is being shaped with the use of language, the language choices, and how we share the information. And you might want to go back and say, we ought to take a look. If we're doing a little more jargon than we should be, maybe we can make our sentences shorter. Maybe we can break everything down into shorter paragraphs. That should really help, and it will. On the other hand, there's actually a flaw in the program itself or a weakness in the project plan that revealed itself through the proposal. And you can go back to your project plan and say, wow, that is great, because now that it's been pointed out, we can completely see how we have a mismatch here between this element and this element. And so now you've got great information to move forward to make some changes and present a stronger program and a stronger proposal another time around. Fabulous feedback. Now, I promised you I was going to tell a little bit of a story as well. Again, do not go chasing the feedback. You need to be really mindful and thoughtful about what you do with the feedback that you get. And what I'm suggesting is less a matter of tweaking one proposal endlessly to the nth degree because this reviewer said this and this reviewer said this. And so, of course, we're going to try to, create something that is perfect for every single reviewer who already has looked at the proposal, right? Those are yesterday's review team members. And now you're trying to tweak to their comments for tomorrow's review team members who have a whole new set of eyes and they're going to see things very, very differently. Again, do not chase the tail around like that. You're never going to catch it. But take a step back with the comments that you do get and see if you can see a pattern that's being reflected back. Pattern in the way we use language, pattern in the way maybe our program thinking happens or how that program thinking is communicated forward in the proposal. I know, for instance, lots of grant writers complain that they don't always get all of the support and information from the program people that they need to really put together a rock-solid proposal. And if you get feedback from the funder that there's something out of line, that's what you get to take that feedback back to your project team and say, look, guys, we're losing grants because we don't have things lined up. We need to fix this. Great, gold star feedback. But my point is, don't go after the nitty-gritties that you get from your review comments. Take a look at the bigger patterns that emerge, because every single reviewer brings a subjective perspective on the proposals. Oh, that word subjective just drives us crazy, doesn't it? It shouldn't be subjective. Whether one proposal gets funded and another one doesn't shouldn't depend on any one reviewer's judgment or another reviewer's assessment. Well, there's no other way to do it, guys. Reviewing proposals is not like scoring a math test. It's more like scoring the answers to essay questions. And so reviewers can only bring their own best judgment. They can only see what they see through their own eyes. So here's my example. Way back when I was still writing federal grants, I remember we got an award and I asked for feedback, and the feedback comes in the forms of copies of the written comments that the reviewers make. Now they make these comments in the individual review process. So when you ask for reviewer comments, you're only going to get what they saw when they were sitting there by themselves looking at your proposal against the score sheet that they were given. What you don't get is what happens when everybody comes together and goes through that group conversation. So in this particular process, we did get the award, but it was really, really interesting to me. There was one section of the proposal called management plan, and it was worth, we'll just say 10 points out of 100 for the whole proposal. And one reviewer number 1, scored it 2. I got 2 out of 10. And the comment was something along the lines of, no evidence that any thought at all was given to creating a solid management plan for this program. Boo, hiss. Well, reviewer number 2, I took a look at their comments. I was very, very bummed. And I took a look at reviewer number 2's comments, and it's like 10 points. And it was basically gold star management plan, one of the best management plans I've ever seen as a federal proposal reviewer. What? Yikes! There was a third reader on the proposal. There were 3 reviewers on that particular proposal, and he fell somewhere in the middle. I don't remember exactly where it was, probably on the high side rather than the low side, because we did get the proposal awarded, right? But it makes you wonder, why did one reviewer see a gold star management plan and another reviewer saw no evidence at all that any thought was given to a management plan when they're looking at exactly the same language on exactly the same proposal against exactly the same scoring criteria? Well, there you go. There's only one explanation, and that's that people see things differently. He wasn't biased against me. He had nothing against me. It wasn't like that at all. It was that for whatever reason, he didn't see what reviewer number 2 saw. Now, was there valuable information there for me? Somehow reviewer number 1 missed the management plan. I don't know how. So what I might do is go back and see if I can figure out where we might have let him go astray. Where might we not have put a signpost that would clearly show him where the management plan was? It should have been right there where he was looking for it on his checklist. Maybe he was very, very tired when he was reading the proposal, and we just made it a little bit too hard for him to figure out what we were talking about. I don't know, and I don't remember what the case was. All I know is that the 2 reviewers out of 3 had a very different perspective on that section in the proposal, and I share that with you to reassure you that it is indeed a subjective process. It always has been. It always will be. That doesn't mean it's not well thought through. It doesn't mean that a lot of care doesn't go into the decision making. It absolutely does. All right, let me see. Is there anything else I wanted to share with you here? I actually went on a little bit longer than I expected, so we went kind of outside the area of asking for feedback, but I think that's great, because what I also want you to do is, when you do get feedback, because you've asked respectfully and with appreciation, and you've asked the right question in the right way, and you do get feedback, I want you to know what to do with it. And the one thing you don't want to do is go chasing around in circles trying to make sure that every little bit of review negative feedback you got back, constructive criticism, next time around is going to be taken care of, because next time around somebody else completely is going to be looking at your proposal, right? But that you can take a bigger picture perspective, take it into context, and then see if there are patterns that you might want to go back and take another look at, and perhaps changing for another go at it. So this was lots of fun for me to put this little video together for you. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it gave you a little bit of a peek inside the black box. I am so looking forward to putting the whole black box training together for you and getting it out there so that it can serve you in a big way on your path to greater grants success. This is Maren Bay saying bye for now. Can't wait to see you next time.